on the river. And I asked, can you imagine a mother who abandons her child, who puts him in a basket and sends him adrift because all the other options that she has are worse? We as a Jewish community have been there before, where our options were bleak. And there have been many times in our history, some of them not such distant history, where we have depended on the kindness of strangers to open their doors and take us in and give us opportunity. When Moses got downstream, there were two possibilities. He could have been found by Pharaoh, or as he was, by Pharaoh's daughter. We all know what would have happened had he been found by Pharaoh. But fortunate for him, and fortunate for history, and fortunate for us, he was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who greeted him and pulled him from the water with love and with compassion. And it is that kind of love and compassion that has been the hallmark of our approach to refugees as well. So, Congressman, we're thrilled to have you with us tonight, and we look forward to have you say what you have to say. And it's my pleasure to introduce Congressman Tom Suozzi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bruchim habayim to everybody here. And the rabbi referenced, because we were strangers in a strange land. And that's why I think that my Jewish friends have such a great empathy for the immigration issue. I have a great feeling for this issue as well. My father was born in Italy, came to the United States as a young boy, faced, people don't realize it now, but I mean, the Italians faced tremendous discrimination. He was the first one in the neighborhood to go to college. He went to Fordham, and then he fought in World War II as a navigator on a B-24 and came back and went to Harvard Law School on the GI Bill. Wow, what a country, unbelievable. But he couldn't get a job at a law firm because nobody would hire Italians, because Italians were either in the mafia or they were associated with Mussolini and the fascists. And for years, he had to fight against Italian American stereotypes and really lived a great American success story. But I've always had a great empathy for immigrants and the decision to make these dramatic decisions to try and come to a strange land for a better life. So I try to marry my feelings and my heart and my desire to try and help people with, practical solutions to actually address them in a fair way, recognizing both these newcomers as well as long-term residents who, are worried about their quality of life and their families and their homes and their neighborhoods. So it's a constant balance. And I've been dealing with this issue throughout my career in public service. When I was the mayor of Glen Cove, the young mayor, 31 years old, in 1994, I gave my inaugural address at the middle school in Glen Cove and talked about when dealing with this issue. We had people on street corners at the time, mainly from El Salvador, looking for day work. And some people saying, get those people out of here. They're littering the streets. They're harassing our kids. They're and worse. They're breaking the law. And then other people saying, oh, these poor people, they're trying to live the American dream, like the same as your family, and they're being persecuted in their own country. America supported these wars in El Salvador, for example, and they're just trying to escape that and trying to live an American dream. And why don't you try and help these people? And balancing that was a very big issue for me as a young mayor, and really challenged me in my conscience at the time. I ended up setting up the first day worker shape-up site anywhere on the East Coast of the United States of America. First at a trailer, and then a permanent location where men could gather for the day. People would come by to hire them for work. If they didn't get hired, they could stay and learn to speak English, or they could learn a job skill. And if they did get hired and didn't get paid, there'd be somebody to advocate on their behalf. And I teamed up with La Fuerza Unida and Catholic Charities and the Glen Cove Community Development Agency, which I was the chairman of as the mayor. And those same guys that gathered on the street corners, they now have their own homes and they own their own businesses. They're landscapers and contractors, and their kids went to school with my kids. And that was 20 something years ago. How many years ago was that? 27 years ago. So, I mean, this is not a new phenomenon in our country. And unfortunately, it's a very challenging problem. And like every problem we face is challenging. We spend so much time yelling at each other, and there's so much fear and so much anger that people don't just sit down and try and work it out. because every complicated problem cannot be solved in an environment of fear and anger. It requires people of goodwill to sit across from the table with each other and say, listen, I disagree with you, but I know that you want a solution to make the world a better place, the same as I do. Let's try and find common ground. That's what I try and do as the vice chair, not the co-chair, the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And so one of the big things that I like to point out is that, going back to my speech as mayor of Glen Cove in 1994, I always say, when looking at these problems, we have to rely on basic fundamental American principles, one of which is all men and women are created equal. Now, it's not that all men and women with a green card are created equal, or all men and women with a passport are created equal. All human beings are created equal and should be treated with human respect and dignity. So we have to try and follow that concept. At the time when I was mayor, I talked about all men and women are equal under the eyes of the law, but it wasn't my job as mayor to enforce the federal laws, immigration laws and Social Security laws. My job was to enforce the local laws. So you can't litter, you can't live in illegal housing, you can't harass people on the streets, you can't drink in public, so we enforce the local laws. We say, if you follow the rules, we're gonna try and help you live the American dream. You break the rules, we're gonna punish you locally. Now I'm in Congress, I gotta look at the federal laws as well. So we've got a big challenge. Now, the fact that we haven't done this for 30 years makes it a very complicated issue. An important thing to point out that I wanted to bring up is that from 1870 to 1920, those first 50 years I looked at, 1870 to 1920, the foreign-born population in America was about 14 or 15% of the population. In the 1920s, we dramatically changed the immigration laws. We made it much tougher to immigrate to America at that time. My grandfather actually came over before that. He joined the U.S. Army and got it for World War I and got this citizenship. And that's how he went back. He married my grandmother, got her pregnant. She had my father. He came back to work, and she came over a few years later with my father. But they could come because they were citizens. As a matter of fact, I found a letter in my grandfather's files from Fiorello LaGuardia, who was the congressman up in Harlem, to my grandfather, who was living at the Harlem at the time, saying, you can bring your father over to visit because you're a citizen and you get a preferential visa to come over to visit America. So I have a letter from Fiorello LaGuardia, the congressman from Harlem, to my grandfather, Miguel Suozzi, in 1925 or so. Anyway, so 1870, 1920, 15% of America was foreign born. 1920 to 1970, because of the Depression, World War II, baby boomers, a lot of American-born children in America in the 50s and 60s. By 1970, the foreign-born population in America was only about 4 or 5%. It had gone down pretty dramatically, and the biggest group were Italian Americans, about 10 or 12% of the overall foreign-born population. But the percentage had gone down dramatically. From 1970 to 2020, if you include all of the foreign-born people, including people that are not documented, we're back up to about 14 or 15% again. And the largest group is Mexican, which has actually gone down over the past couple of years. People move back to Mexico because of economic opportunities there. But there's a growing population of people from the Northern Triangle, it's called, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. There's people coming from other countries as well. About 1 million people immigrate to the United States every year legally, most of which, 700,000, 600,000, 700,000, are because they have family here already and they've got some sort of preferential immigration legal status to come. Trump wanted to try and change that. He called it chain migration. But it's always been family unification in America's history. There are other groups, refugees, for example, very small population. And let me just say, with the families, there's tens of millions of people eligible. It's 600,000 or 700,000 can get processed between all the different groups every year. Refugees, there are 65 million refugees in the world. America will bring up to 120,000. Trump put it down to like less than 10,000. And his last year in office was even smaller than that. This was a big debate that just happened with Biden. Then there's people who come based upon a lottery system, which is for people where less than 50,000 people have come from your country in the past 5 years, and you're eligible for a lottery, And there's literally, 10 or 20 million people signed up for that lottery. We take up to 50,000 people a year. Well, that's a way a lot of Africans came to America, because we have so few people that have immigrated from Africa to America. Less than 50,000 a year are eligible. Then we have people that can come based upon their skills. And that's another group that's probably, I forget the number now. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's like less than 100,000 people. And there are literally, 20 million people who've signed up for that program. So there's an enormous amount of people who want to come to America legally. And about, like I said, 1 million people a year come legally. But there are tens of millions of people that want to come here. The southern border is about 1,800 miles. There are, I forget the number, but there's probably a couple dozen ports of entry. A lot of legal. It's the busiest port in the world. The southern border, the busiest border in the world, the southern border of the United States with Mexico. People come over, billions of dollars of business every year, a lot less during the pandemic, obviously, but still lots of business comes over. There's an incredible amount of processing that goes on through Customs and Border Patrol. It's the guys in the blue shirts that are responsible for monitoring these ports of entry. I've been to these ports of entry. I went to one this past few weeks ago, and they're really small facilities, quite frankly. People who want to come seeking asylum or try to come into the country, they can process maybe 40 or 50 people a day at each of these facilities. Some were built in the 50s and maybe upgraded in the 80s, some of them, but they're really just, woefully inadequate facilities. And the people that come in between the ports of entries, the people that you see crossing the rivers, the Rio Grande River. I went to the Rio Grande Valley. I patrolled the river by boat. I went with trucks, along with the Customs and Border Patrol officials wearing the green shirts. So the blue shirts do the actual ports of entry. The green shirts are in between the ports of entry. That's where you see the people, coming across and taking, rafts or swimming, or, people coming in long lines of people. The people come that way because they want to get out of their country and they want to come to the United States of America. To be processed through the ports of entry is absurd. There's thousands of people in line to go through these places. The people are stuck in Mexico. They had the Remain in Mexico policy under the previous administration with thousands of people. They get abused while they're there. They often have to pay people off to get on the line, pay off Mexican officials to get on the line to come into the country. They're living, in substandard conditions. And they're trying to come to the country because they're desperate. And they can't, there's so many people that can't come through. Then we have to recognize that there are people trying to abuse the system. There are people that are making billions, not millions, billions of dollars by collecting fees of $6,000 a person as coyotes and as transporters, traffickers, who bring people. We'll show you how to get across the border. We'll show you where to go. We'll coach you what to say. If you had 170,000 people in March when it was this crazy influx, $6,000 a piece, that's $1 billion just in March in fees that these criminals are making. And there have been many surges at different times. 2014, I think it was, or was it 12? 14, I think it was. 2019 was a massive surge. And now in March of this year. And what happens is the coyotes and the traffickers, not just the surges, but all the time, they say things to, come now before so-and-so gets into office. Come now before the election. Come now, this guy's easier. Come now, this guy's tougher. Whatever. They just create reasons as to why people should come now, because you can make more money. And at the same time, in March of this year, you had the Biden administration change some policies regarding this Remain in Mexico policy. You had one of the states in Mexico that said, we're not going to take children when you send them back to us, we're not going to take children under 7 years of age. So the U.S. set up a policy with 7 years or younger, it'd be easier to get in. And you saw this crazy influx of people coming with young children. So often, people just sticking kids with families, and then they'd come across, they'd even come to the United States. There's stories, I can't prove it, that, they'd come into the United States and then they'd send the kids back again, and they'd come up with another group. So the kids would be used as pawns in this, under 7 years old. And a lot of unaccompanied minors. 80% of the people that come across the border in between the ports of entry are, when they go through the process, are denied access because the volume was so heavy and they couldn't handle it, because you go from the green shirt Customs and Border officials and the facilities they have, where you see a lot of the pictures, the tents and the kids all sleeping on the floor with the metal blankets. Then they're supposed to go from there. They're supposed to be within 72 hours. It doesn't happen. Supposed to go to an HHS, Health and Human Services facility. But the backlog is so great that it takes forever for the HHS people to be ready for the people coming from Customs and Border Patrol. The bottom line is, it's a completely broken system. And we have to stop making it about Trump and Biden and Obama or whoever. This is an American problem that's been going on for much too long. When I visited the border, it was one of the first bipartisan trips. It's always the Republicans go down and they'll say it's a crisis, and Biden, this is all your fault. And, before the Democrats say this is Trump and blah, 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 it's all your fault. This is going on forever. And there's a lot of misery, a lot of suffering. I was in one of these tent facilities, beautiful, clean, big, gigantic facility, computers, air conditioned, nice. You go into the pods where the kids are, they're all sleeping on the floor next to each other. These facilities are designed for, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, don't hold me to it, but 20, 25 people, and there's 80 people in there, 80 kids. And they're on the floor sleeping, and they sleep all day long with the blankets, with their metal blankets on. They go outside maybe for an hour if it works out. Well, they just lie there on the floor, sleeping for days and days and days, up to as many as 20 days before they get shipped off to a HHS facility, or they get shipped to go let loose into the country somewhere, which is a big Catholic Charities facility where I was that handles a lot of the kids. And helps you get a bus ticket to go stay with family somewhere within the United States. You get a date to go show up at court. The bottom line is the system is broken. And the big idea that I and a lot of my colleagues seem to agree upon, and I had this idea years ago, but now it's building a little bit of consensus, is we need an Ellis Island for the southern border. We need a massive processing facility. Instead of these facilities that can take 40 or 50 people at a time a day, we need a facility where people can legally come into the United States of America and apply for asylum, many of which will get denied because you can't come just because you're unhappy and you're trying to get a better economic condition. But in those facilities need to have everything that Ellis Island had. You need to have dormitories. You need to have doctors. You need to have the HHS and the Customs and Border Patrol in one place. You need to have immigration judges there. You need to have the whole thing processed in this one place instead of sending them into the country to be denied a year or two later. They need to be either accepted or denied there on the border. And we need to build a similar facility on the southern border of Mexico with Guatemala. And we need to invest in the Northern Triangle to try and help these countries do a better job. Why are so many people streaming out of these countries? Why are they so miserable that they have to get out, that they're willing to put their babies in a basket and with pitch tar on it? Why are they willing to do this? Why are they so, why is it so miserable? The United States needs to do a better job working with these countries, and not necessarily only the countries, because you can't always trust the governments there, to invest there to the root cause of what's going on. So I believe that you have to do border enforcement. I think you need to do better processing. You need to treat people like human beings when they get here and before they get here. And you need to invest in these other places as to why people are coming in the first place. So I think America can handle 15% population being foreign born. We have throughout our history. We need to figure out what, with the 11 million people that we have here in the country now, what is our plan? So we need better border control. We need better processing. We need to deal with the influx into the country. I'm going to take my jacket off. I'm too hot. We need to do a better job with the influx into the country. And for the people that are here in America now, we need to provide a path to citizenship for those people that came here as young children under 18 years of age, who have grown up here, who have either graduated from high school or are now going to college, or have graduated from high school or are now a veteran or in the military, or have graduated from college and have been working steady for at least 3 years and have no criminal record. We need to give those kids a path to citizenship. They're called the Dreamers. It's about 1.9 million people that we think would be eligible. There's another 400,000 people that have temporary protective status. They were invited to stay in America, to be in America because of some dramatic, awful thing that was happening in their country, like a hurricane or a flood or something terrible that happened there. We need to give them a pathway to citizenship. Then I believe that we should give not a pathway to citizenship, but some sort of legal status, so you don't have to be worrying about being deported every single minute of your life, but give you a legal status to another 2.5 million people at least who've been here for some period of time, probably 10 years or more, have been here, have not committed crimes, whether you're here in the United States of America, and get you into the system legally. So you're paying taxes and you're not looking over your shoulder, and you're related, preferential treatment for people related to Dreamers and to temporary protective status folks. And we need to show that we can do that and do it reasonably and it works. And then try and address the other remaining 5 million people once we've proved that that works. Why isn't it happening? Why aren't the things that sound sort of reasonable happening? You have Democrats who are saying, wait, we want everything. We want all 11 million people to have a path to citizenship. We want, we think we should treat these people, we give them a chance and get them in here. It's our fault. It's been going on for 30 years. Give them a path to citizenship. And, even if they broke the rules coming here in the first place, let's just get over it and deal with that. And you have the Republicans saying, hey, you better enforce the borders. We're not going to do anything. We're not even for the Dreamers until you have a plan to take care of the borders. There were different proposals under Trump, but he always would put in poison pills about like trying to get rid of family unification, which he called chain migration. And he said, we wanted to get rid of the visa lottery because there was a lot of Africans came to America. Let's get rid of that. And let's make it only skilled labor coming to the country, which I can tell you reasons why I think that that's a bad idea, but I'm not going to go into that now. And not only do we have to enforce the borders, but you know what? I don't like the idea of giving these people who came here illegally, even if they were little kids at the time, even if they were temporary protective status people, I don't like them getting in front of the line of the people that are coming here legally. We've got all these people waiting to come in this country legally. They're following the rules. Don't give these people amnesty, and don't let them jump the line. And then there's just people that are just outright don't want all these Latinos or other foreign-born populations in America living here. They don't want them. So you get your citizenship. The only Democrats want to get citizenship so they can vote in elections, so the Democrats can take over. So there's just a lot of heat. There's not a lot of light. I'm constantly working on trying to find that. I've found out that in Congress, it's very important to build relationships and understand where people are coming from and what motivates them. And there's more. I've been thinking over the past couple of weeks about we have to do a much better job. We do all kinds of bipartisanship stuff in Congress all the time on important things. It's just not the main issues that you hear about every day. And we don't promote it at all. We have to start promoting it. We have a piece of legislation we passed in the House, we haven't passed in the Senate, related to farm workers. We got 30 Republican votes on it. It was all Democrats and 30 Republican votes to try and legalize a lot of farm workers, millions of people in the country. We passed it to the House. We got to get the Senate to do it. But we just need to do a better job marketing things. And what we need to market is bipartisanship and the fact that we are getting things done, because people are just getting so sick and so discouraged and so anxious about the fact that they feel like nobody's working with each other. So we just need to do it. We need to do, and there are some people that don't work together. I don't want to get, I was there on the insurrection. I was in the Capitol when the whole thing happened. I was one of the last people to get out of the chamber. But we need to do a better job of the things, let people know what we are working on. The bottom line is, this president, I think, is really going to do a lot of big things. A lot of things we've been talking about for a long time, whether it's trying to rebuild the middle class, well, certainly dealing with the pandemic, trying to deal with the economy, dealing with racial injustice, dealing with climate change, dealing with the lack of trust in government. I think dealing with immigration and gun violence and a whole host of other things, this president is really going to make a difference. So he's thinking big, he's thinking bold, and I'm very excited about the next. I always thought when I was younger, I said, my grandfather and my father came from a foreign country. My grandmother on the other side came from England, and they all lived through the Depression. And then my father was in World War II, and they all lived through World War II stateside. And then there was Kennedy and the civil rights movement and the environmental movement. I said, what's going to be the big thing my generation faces? It's like, this is it right now. This is it. The pandemic and what's happened in the economy and the insurrection and how we're going to deal with all these are big, 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 important times. So it's great that so many of you, 53 people, or I think it's 53 of you, are on a call on a Sunday night to listen to me drone on about these issues. But it's really wonderful that you care as much as you do, that you pay as much attention as you do, and I'll make myself available for any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Congressman Suozzi. We definitely do care, and that's why we've tuned in on our Sunday night, as you said. That's why we're so honored and so grateful to be hearing from you and your insights and your experiences. Just so that everybody knows, since we do have about 55 people on the Zoom with us tonight, we're going to try to keep everybody muted and do the questions via the chat box just to minimize chaos and background noise and things like that. I do see some questions coming in. And so please, if you do have a question for the congressman, please type it into the chat box, and we will make sure that he sees it and is aware of it. If I could actually just start off with a question of my own that I've been thinking about while you've been talking. It's been, my heart has been breaking, over the past couple of years to see the plight of the children that you mentioned that are, sleeping in the, the metallic sleeping bags and, that have been separated from family, and many of us have been concerned about the plight of the kids who were sort of lost in the shuffle, right? They were separated from family, and it wasn't clear if they were going to be able to be reunited because the administration wasn't keeping clear records. So I'm wondering if you have any updates about, the reunification efforts, and if those kind of lost children and parents are going to be able to find each other again.
Well, first of all, what the previous administration did with the separation of children was just god awful, and it's just inhumane, awful, thoughtless. Many children are going to have trauma for the rest of their lives because of that, and who knows how we as a society will pay for that. Certainly, they'll have to pay for it. A lot of people. There's been a lot of reunifications, but there are still children that have not been reunified. And I don't have any specific stats for you. I got one of my staffers on the call, Jeff, and I'll ask Jeff to talk to the Washington folks to try and get us some stats on that, and I'll send that back to you. But I know that this administration, that's a big priority, is to address that, and they're working on it feverishly, and it's a very serious issue. But it was so poorly handled that, think of it, of a young baby, young child, being separated, and then, they don't speak English, and then, they don't necessarily even know their last name, and, where they're from, so it's terrible. It's so much despair and so much anxiety. But I know that there's a lot of focus on trying to rectify that. And that practice has been discontinued. But there are a lot of unaccompanied children that come over also.
Thank you. Trying to keep track of we have a couple of questions that are coming in. One question is, has the power of ICE increased or decreased, or is it the same?
Their power is the same. The policies have been changed. People said, let's abolish ICE. that was like when people were saying, let's abolish the IRS. I mean, that's just neither one. That's absurd. And the agents who work for ICE are not the bad actors here. I've seen a lot of agents who work for ICE who've been very empathetic and sympathetic. I mean, they're supposed to be law enforcement officials. They're babysitters. So you can't blame them for the awful policies that they've had to deal with. So the policies need to be addressed. And ICE is not getting funded more. It's not getting funded less. What we need is a comprehensive change. Now, the Biden administration has proposed a comprehensive change in the policy. It'd be great if they could do it. It's to legalize all 11 million people over a period of 10 years and a lot of standards. And it'd be great, but it won't happen in any bipartisan fashion, and you probably won't get it through the Senate. But you can't do the 50-vote reconciliation thing there, and you're not going to be able to get rid of the filibuster either. So there has to be a compromise that does border enforcement, change in policy, and legalization of people that are here. You have to do all these things together. So that is just hard work and requires compromise. ICE needs to continually be reformed, as do a lot of different agencies need to be reformed. But it's not like the ICE guys are all bad, rotten people. Are there some bad, rotten people? Yes, there are. It's like police. We're not against the police, but we need reform for certain police departments, or all the police departments. We need reform. That doesn't mean we're anti-police, anti-law enforcement. We have systemic problems that have existed for a long time. There's got to be it's never all this or all that. It's kind of, you got to find the balance. So you need better border control. You need more agents. You need more money. You need more immigration judges. You need more radar. You need more drones. You need more enforcement. But you also need a massive investment in these processing facilities that can handle this huge volume of cases before you send people back into I see someone saying, why do we let people back into the country? Because the system's overwhelmed. So we have to figure out a way to address that policy by having better processing, by stopping people when they first come in the first place, by investing in their countries. But there's no way to humanely hold the people that are coming in the existing facilities. Toby Meth is very excited. He says, stop blaming Trump. I'm not blaming Trump. I made a whole point about that, Toby. I'm not trying to blame Trump. I said, it's not making it about Trump. We need people working together across party lines. You may not have been on in the beginning. Okay.
Do we have any other questions for the congressman? We have a unique opportunity to ask him what's on our minds.
How do I ask when I have a question?
Okay, we were doing it via the chat box, but you're on, so go ahead.
Anita.
Yeah, I just a comment of something I just read about that happened in San Diego today with a capsized boat, and a lot of people, some people died. They were coming from either Mexico or Central America. Do they still have the law that when you touch the beach, whatever point of the United States you touch first, they cannot send you back? They used to have that for Cuba. I don't know if they still have it. When you reach, when you reach it and you touch the U.S. soil,
no,
they
many
accepted
people,
you at that time.
Many people are sent back. The challenge is how do you go through the process of finding out what is the reason you came? Are you really here for a legitimate reason? Or are you just here, because you want to be here, as opposed to you're being politically persecuted, or people are trying to kill you in your country? You can't just come to America because you want to come to America. Cuba was different because of the government there. Leaving Cuba was something that America encouraged, actually, because of the problems in Cuba. So you can't just come here because you want to come. So a lot of people do get sent back. 80% of the cases that get adjudicated, people get sent back.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. you have to balance it. I mean, we want to be as good as possible and help as many people as possible, but we can't just make it so there's no rules. There has to be some rules or the country would just be overrun.
We have a couple of other questions coming in that I will try to relay.
Here, this Linda Leibowitz said, if you have a legitimate asylum claim and you reach US soil, you're still entitled to a hearing. No? Yes, you're correct, Linda. That's correct. That's the challenge is, but the time between you coming here, as Anita said, touching US soil, and then determining whether or not you have a legitimate, that's the big word, legitimate asylum claim, that's a whole process you have to go through. We don't have the processing facilities to determine whether the person has the legitimate asylum claim or not. So that's where the system gets overwhelmed. And we were sending people back quickly to Mexico. And then the Mexicans said in this particular state, we're not taking anybody under 7 years old anymore. So people started sending groups of people with kids under 7 years old as a way to get people in.
We have another question that I think is a really, these are all great, but we have a question I think is a really excellent one from Miriam Silverman. What other issues is your problem-solving committee in Congress addressing?
Well, we have work task force on just about every big issue that's out there. One that's really coming to a head right now as we speak is this issue of police reform. We're right in the middle of trying to get the Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on police reform, trying to address the very serious problems we have in the country. Issues like the chokehold and issues like, if a cop gets fired in one police department, how do you create a national database to prevent them from getting hired by another police department? People not knowing that they had these bad activities before. But the big challenge is about the issue of qualified immunity and how can you sue the police officer if they did something very egregious and people getting away with things. So there's a compromise they're working on saying, well, you can't sue the police officer, you can sue the department and have the departments hold them accountable. So we're right in the middle of trying to do that compromise between a woman named Karen Bass, who's a former Speaker of the California Assembly on the Democratic side, used to be the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, and a senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, who's an African-American senator, Republican, and trying to get the two of them to find common ground on that. So we're right in the middle of that conversation. We are working on trying to find compromise on the infrastructure. We think that we can get Republicans to support the Biden plan, which is sold as an infrastructure plan, is really what people think of as traditional infrastructure, and then maybe some green energy stuff and some broadband, and then another separate big piece, which is a jobs program, which, I would like to do that. And most Democrats would like to do the whole big thing. But the Republicans only want to do the traditional infrastructure, and they'll bend a little bit on broadband because it really matters in a lot of the rural communities they represent. And they'll bend a little bit begrudgingly on energy issues. So there's maybe a compromise at $1 trillion on that piece of it. And then the Democrats will have to do the other piece on their own using what's called the reconciliation process. The question all becomes, how anxious is the president to actually do something bipartisan? Because if we don't do something bipartisan on infrastructure, there won't be anything bipartisan will happen, because it'll take between now and July and then September to get the infrastructure deal done. And by September, everybody will be gearing up for the elections next year, and then it'll be all over. So we're right in the middle of that. We were very, very instrumental in getting the $900 billion deal done at the end of last 2020, in the end of the Trump administration, to get us through the winter until the new deal came out with President Biden that the Democrats just did. But we were very instrumental in getting a $900 billion deal to get us through the winter. We were right in the middle of that negotiation to bring that together. So we're always working on, we have a working group on a lot of different issues, but those are some of the ones that are happening right now as we speak.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions that came in about the issue of the children crossing the border. We have one question that asks, how can we help children who are already here in a compassionate and supportive way? And a related question, children are the most vulnerable population. How do we both attend to their needs and discourage parents from sending them over?
Well, that's the challenge. I mean, this is a very, very complicated issue. And we have the Health and Human Service facilities are, for the most part, pretty well-run facilities that try and treat children compassionately and families compassionately and help them relocate. But then we have the challenge locally. I mean, I just had a meeting with school districts the other day saying, we don't want a bunch of unaccompanied children coming to our school districts again. We were very much a large focus of getting a lot of these kids to our schools here on Long Island. New York, California, Florida were some of the biggest places to get unaccompanied minors, Long Island included. And it costs a lot of money to educate children. So it's like everything, it's a constant balance to figure out how can we treat people like human beings, but at the same time, we have to discourage people from coming across the border or sending their kids unaccompanied across the border. So a lot of it has to do with preventing folks from coming across the border from Guatemala into Mexico in the first place, and then from Mexico into the United States. And working with our allies and with these other countries is a very important part of that, so that they can treat people like human beings where they live and in these other countries, which requires money that they don't necessarily have, but it'll be a lot cheaper for the United States to do it, help them to treat people humanely in their countries before they cross over into the United States of America. So a lot of it has to do with processing. A lot of it has to do with timing and processing. And there's no simple answer. Like someone said, why don't we just close the border? Okay, I wish it was that simple. Someone just said Biden is the problem. I mean, I wish it was that simple. It's not that. These are complicated issues that required people to take the temperature down, stop yelling at each other, and stop making it about, hate and anger, and figure out how can reasonable people sit across from each other and try and find common ground. And it's not just the politicians, it's the people. So let me go back to like a basic fundamental problem that exists in our country. Our country is fractured in our politics. Why is it so divided? What's going on? A lot of it has to do with the fact that many of the seats in Congress are safe seats. It's very hard to lose a lot of these seats. My seat could go either way. It's what's called a D+1 seat. It could go Democratic or Republican. But of the 435 seats in Congress, 380 of them are safe seats because they're gerrymandered, they're drawn in such a way they're either all Republicans or they're all Democrats. So 380 out of the 435 seats are safe seats. The competitive seats are like 50 some odd seats in between. And so the Republican's going to win the Republican seat, the Democrat's going to win the Democratic seat. The only way these folks can lose is by losing a primary, but nobody votes in the primaries. Less than 15% of registered voters vote in the primaries. The far right votes in the Republican primaries. The far left votes in the Democratic primaries. And as a result, the people in these safe seats pander to the far right for the Republicans, pander to the far left for the Democrats. They're pulled out to the extremes. If they dare do something in the middle, they risk facing a primary in the next election where very few people vote. Then you add on top of that social media. Who participates the most in social media? People with extreme views are the most active people on social media. People that say hateful, mean-spirited things and very passionate about single issues. They're the most active people on social media. So, and they're pulling us to these extremes again. Then you add cable news on top of it. Fox News over here, MSNBC over there. More one-sided. Only 4 million people watch these shows. There's 330 million people in the United States of America. Only 4 million people watch the highest rated Fox show. Only 4 million people watch the highest MSNBC show. But they're not trying to find the balanced position. They're trying to pursue an agenda. Then you add on top of that the worst thing we have to fear of all, which are foreign adversaries that are using our free system and are using social media to sow civil unrest in our country. It's one of the reasons anti-Semitism is on the rise, I believe. It's one of the reasons we have these hostile fights between Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. There are people that legitimately have those positions, but our foreign adversaries are accelerating them. They're adding fuel on the fire whenever they can because they want to see us fighting with each other. They want to sow civil unrest. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they're constantly trying to pull us apart. They like to see us all fighting with each other. So we cannot solve the problems we face. I mean, this immigrant, like I said before in the beginning of my remarks, it's gone on for 30 something years, longer, 40 years, immigration. And that goes with gun violence, that goes with climate change, that goes with healthcare, that goes with any of the big issues that are out there. You can't solve these things unless reasonable people can have this conversation. And you can't get reasonable people to sit down and have these conversations when they're being bombarded from the extremes on the outside, not encouraging them to find common ground. So we need to encourage people to work with each other to find common ground. I get beat up all, you're in the problem, so how dare you talk to the Republicans? How dare you try and work with them? They're terrible. And they get the same thing on their side. So we need to get people to start working with each other. It's the only way we're going to solve it. Don't underestimate the values that Rabbi Lucas teaches you on Shabbos. Okay, we're losing a sense of values in our country, and we can only solve the problems we have by relying on values. And part of values is certainly treating immigrants, the stranger, with respect as human beings, but it also is treating your adversaries with, you can disagree with people and disagree with them strongly, but you don't have to hold them in contempt. And you have to figure out how to find common ground with each other. Okay.
Amen to that. We may have time for another question or two, if that's okay with you, Congressman.
Yep. Someone said, how many Republicans and how many Democrats are in the caucus? 29 Democrats and 29 Republicans. It's always even 1 for 1. It's Noah's Ark. You can only have one of each. Well, 2 of each, I guess. So.
We had a question also from our own Cantor Barnoy, who wanted to know, back to the issue of the kids, the migrant minors. Can American families foster these children until they're processed instead of leaving them at these facilities?
Yes, there's a big effort to work on that. Yes. Again, it's a matter of processing time. I mean, my feeling is that a lot of the HHS facilities are very well run, humane, decent, really a godsend for a lot of people, a lot of children, a lot of families. Getting them processed, though, out of these short-term facilities that you're only supposed to be in for 72 hours, that they're all in for as much as 20 days, it's a matter of the processing. It's just, it's how can you be ready to make the transition from this facility to the foster family or to the HHS facility or to whatever, sending them to other family in the US. It's just a matter of the workload and the volume and the systems that are in place that are not designed for this type of volume. So there's a couple things that happened at once. Okay. One is there's a new administration. The administration changed some of the policies. Someone talked about, go back to the stay in Mexico policy. Well, that made a big difference when we changed that policy. 2 is the Mexican state that said we're not going to take the kids under 7 years old. That was a dramatic change in the policy. 3 is the coyotes and the cartels that are making all this money. They go out and they manipulate people because they're going to make an awful lot of money by manipulating people. And then it's not just happening now. It's happened in 2019, happened in 2004. I mean, it happens all the time, but I mean, we saw these big surges at different times. So that's another big issue is the cartels. And then there was a court case that said it was in November of last year related to, you can't kick certain people out under Article 42, which is related to the coronavirus. And you have to follow a different article. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head now. I forget what the number is, but these things all happen at once. And that's why we saw the surge. The numbers are not as high as they were in March, but it's still a problem. And it's going to continue to be a problem until we find common ground to find a solution. This is going to just keep on coming up, no matter who the president is, no matter who runs the Congress, no matter who runs the Senate. We've seen this happen so many times. Don't fall for it's this fault, it's their fault. This is going on for a long time. We need to find common ground.
Congressman, you said something very true before, which is that, these issues of caring for the vulnerable and the stranger are very close to our hearts. They're a key part of our Torah and Judaism. And we're so grateful to you for, first of all, working on these issues, for sharing your insights and your experience with us this evening. And, you know, because these issues are dear to our hearts, we feel it keenly when we want to help and we want to make a difference, but we, you know, lay people, so to speak, don't necessarily have the platform to do that. And there's a concept in Judaism, a traditional concept called the shaliach, the emissary, that if I, for instance, am not able to complete a task myself, I can make you my emissary and you can do that task. So I think in a very powerful way, you are our emissary in making sure that this important work gets done, and making sure that this bipartisan work gets done so that we can deal with issues like the immigration crisis in meaningful and in compassionate ways. And we're so grateful to you for representing us and doing that important work. And we're so grateful to you again for speaking with us tonight, for sharing your precious time with us, and for bringing us along on this journey that you've been on, and representing the interests that are dear to our hearts and our souls and our teachings, by striving for a country and a community that is ever more just and ever more compassionate.
Well, let me tell you that it's a great honor for me to serve as your emissary. And it's a great privilege and a great responsibility that I have, and I know that. And I appreciate your encouragement, and I appreciate the people that are interested in these issues, that want to try and figure out how to solve problems and make people's lives better, and encourage me to do that. And I'm going to keep on trying to do that. I don't need this job. I want to do the job. And so my goal is not to keep the job. My goal is to do the job. And sometimes someone said, are you discouraged? Sometimes I feel like leaving. I'm really happy to be in public service. I've devoted a huge part of my life to it. And it's very hard sometimes, but it's a great, great honor and a great responsibility, especially during these very important times. And I couldn't do the job unless I had the help and support of many of the people on this call. So I want to thank you very much. And I'm going to keep on trying my best. I'm going to keep on. Listen, I'm a Democrat. I'm a through and through Democrat. I'm over the top Democrat. I've always been a Democrat, but I'm going to keep on trying to work across party lines to try and find common ground, because I know that's the only way you can actually solve problems. That's the only way you can actually fix things. And I could go yell at the wind and, you know, say I'm doing my way or the highway. It doesn't work. So I know that from doing this for as long as I have. So I'm going to keep on working. I'm going to keep on trying to educate people and learn more myself, and try and persuade people to the merits of my view, which is that we've got to treat people like human beings. We've got to have respect for people and their humanity. And we have to do it in a way that also looks out for the interest of longtime residents that live here in our country, that want to have a law and order and want to have rules-based society. So I'm going to keep on doing that. I'm going to keep on working on it. And, you know, I've gotten a lot of good things done in Congress. It's just this past year, you know, this American Rescue Plan is humongous. I'm fighting to try and get our state and local tax deduction back. That's you wouldn't believe the fight that I'm in over that, but it's a very big issue for us in New York State. It's an existential matter for New York State. We're losing too many people. But I'm going to keep on trying and keep trying to do the best I can. And I really thank everybody for your interest and your encouragement. And Rabbi Lucas, also, thank you so much for your positive words in the beginning of this conversation. So, Toda Rabba Lachem. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Toda Rabba.
Thank you.